Sirens clawed at the night as Imani Carter said, "Breathe, baby, breathe," while clutching Noah's limp hand. The ER doors burst open, and fluorescent light hit like blame. A nurse barked questions, and Imani answered through trembling breath. The smell of bleach and thunder-wet asphalt tangled in her chest. Monitors beeped with cruel rhythm that matched her panic. A figure strode in with authority that stole air from the room. Imani froze before her own voice, whispering, "No." Dr. Malik Rhodes said, "We've got him," but the past shattered like glass between them. His eyes flicked from Noah's face to hers, and history crashed like surf. Imani said, "Do not touch him," even as fear begged for his hands. Malik said, "He needs me," and the room narrowed to the word need. Noah coughed, thin and papery, and Imani tasted iron courage. The storm hammered the windows, and fate folded them into the same page. Triage swallowed time and spit it back, mean end. Imani said, "He had a fever," then the wheeze came like a lock. The nurse nodded, pen dancing across forms that felt like accusations. Malik hovered at the threshold between past and duty. Imani remembered a porch goodbye that tore her open. "Malik," said steroids first, then Neb, and the words felt like thunder made of mercy. Noah whimpered, and Imani folded her fear into a lullaby of touch. The nurse said, "Mom, stay with me," and guided breath against panic. Malik's voice softened without permission. Imani said, "You don't get to be gentle," but her gaze begged the medicine to win. The vents hissed a promise the night couldn't keep. Rain kept time for a prayer with no name. The nebulizer whispered like a secret that knew their names. Imani said, "I've got you," while counting breaths like beads. Malik adjusted the flow and kept his eyes clinical. Memory clawed up anyway, showing candlelight and a ring that never landed. Imani said, "Why are you even here?" But the words were aimed at the universe. Malik said, "Because he needs care," and his voice almost cracked. The nurse pretended not to see the past wrestling in present tense. When Noah's chest eased, a small mercy in a room full of storms. Imani felt grateful and furious in the same heartbeat. Malik said, "He's responding," and the monitor agreed. Imani said, "Good," and bit down on everything else she could have said. Silence pressed until language fractured. Imani said, "You walked away, letting the past bleed under her tongue." Malik said, "You shut me out, meeting blame with the same currency." The nurse lowered her gaze and drifted like fog. Noah stirred, and the room remembered its center. Malik said, "I'm here now," and the words felt too small for the ears. Imani said, "Now is a broken arrival," and wanted to swallow it back. He reached for a chart instead of her hand. The IV pump clicked like counting sins. Imani said, "Just help my son, and let the pleas stand without pride." Malik nodded and moved with steady practiced grace that still knew her storms. The worst of the wheeze loosened, leaving a bright ache behind. Imani said, "Thank you," and it scraped like gravel over glass. Malik said, "We'll observe him for a while," and avoided her history. The rain softened to a hush that sounded like after. Imani stared at Noah's lashes and counted every small future. Malik said, "He'll need follow-up," and the word need echoed again. Imani said, "We will," and felt the we burn. A janitor's mop traced halos around old footprints. The clock hands crawled with stubborn dignity. Malik said, "I'm not the same man," almost too quiet to hear. Imani said, "Neither am I," and the room settled into a fragile truce that could still break. The waiting room hummed like a tired hive, and Imani counted the seconds that didn't heal. A cartoon fish swam on a silent TV, pretending the world was kind. Imani said, "He slept through the last cough and bit the lie." Malik hovered near the doorway, professional like Alma. He said, "Vitals are stable for now," and the words held her together. Imani remembered rent due, daycare calls, and promises that broke on contact. She said, We manage as if the word were a shield. Rain ticked the window like a metronome for doubt. Malik said, I never stopped looking for a way back, and regret colored the air. Imani said, back is a locked door, while her hand kept time on Noah's blanket. A memory unspooled in the antiseptic glow, cheap apartment air warm with summer. Imani said, you promised a ring after residency, and tasted metal on the word. Malik said, I promised we'd build when the ground was steady. The ground never held, and pride swallowed apology. Imani learned bills, blowouts, and birthdays with 3 candles. She said, I stopped waiting and started working. Malik looked at Noah's small shoes lined like questions. He said, I missed firsts I never knew were mine. The waiting room clock clicked through their history. Imani said, you miss the middles too, and the truth landed without sound. Zuri arrived like a sunrise with edges, carrying coffee that steamed like sense. Zuri said, you breathing or just pretending, and sat hard beside Imani. Imani laughed without humor and said, pretending is cheaper. Zuri's eyes measured Malik, then folded back to Noah. She said, he's a doctor, not a miracle, and let it sting. Malik took the hit and adjusted a chart. Imani said, he used to be a promise. Zuri said tonight, he's a tool, use him, and pressed the coffee into her palm. The heat argued with the cold in her chest. Imani said, I hate needing anything, and watched Noah's ribs rise even. Forms appeared, and responsibility wore government fonts. The nurse said, parent signature, here and here. Malik paused, pen hovering over a father line neither asked for. Imani said, I sign, and the syllables cut clean. He said, medical history could help, voice careful as glass. Imani remembered his mother's guarded smile and his schedule like a fortress. She said, he's allergic to peanuts in silence, and almost smiled. Malik nodded, eyes heavy with arithmetic of years. The printer chattered like gossip. Imani said, get him well, and set her name down like a boundary you could see. The storm thinned to a whisper as dawn threatened the edges. Malik said observation looks good, and relief loosened Imani's spine. Zuri said, you need food, and a nap, and a boundary. Imani said in that order, and traced circles on Noah's palm. Malik stood closer than memory allowed. He said, I can help, even if you don't want me. Imani met his gaze and said, help him first. The fluorescent hum softened, and courage settled like weight in her hands. Zuri said, when this is over, we talk rules. Imani said, we will, and watched a new morning draft its first thin line. Morning rinsed the ER in pale silver, but the night still clung to bones. Malik watched Noah sleep and measured the distance to Imani like a cliff. Malik said, his lungs sound clearer, and steadied his voice. Imani said, good, and the word wore armor. A drip clicked time between them. Malik said, I wasn't ready back then, and shame throbbed like a bruise. Imani said, readiness doesn't feed babies, and kept her gaze on Noah. He reached for the stethoscope, and memory reached back. Malik said, I should have stayed, and the air held still. Imani said, you left before the leaving. The monitor sighed, forgiving neither. Hope pried one eyelid open. Fear closed it again. Silence cracked first. Imani said, I carried questions and groceries and guilt alone. Malik said, I chased prestige like it could fix our cracks. The IV beeped like a metronome for regret. Imani said, pride costs more than diapers. Malik said, I know what it cost you, and looked away. The past pressed its thumb on her throat. Imani said, do not pity me, and stood taller. Malik said, I respect you, and the word felt late. She touched Noah's hair and found breath. Imani said, respect means showing up. Malik said, then I am here. And the room measured truth against time. Zuri arrived with a bag that smelled like breakfast and boundaries. Zuri said, I brought eggs and opinions. Imani laughed, small, and sore. Malik said thank you for staying with them, and meant it. Zuri said, I stay for the truth. The coffee steamed like advice. Imani said, he thinks showing up fixes years. Zuri said, showing up is page 1, not the book. Malik took the page and swallowed pride. Malik said, tell me what helps today. Zuri said, consistency, clean communication, and receipts. The word receipts made Imani breathe. Noah stirred and reached for light. They all leaned toward it. Judgment arrived in pearls and posture. Imani Rhodes stepped in with weather for eyes. Imani said, Malik, you look exhausted, and glanced past Imani like glass. Imani said, Noah is improving, and held the floor. Imani said, I'm sure the staff is capable, slicing with sugar. Malik said, Mom, this is Imani and Noah, and placed names like bridges. Imani said, we value discretion, and the word we burned. Zuri said, we value health and respect, and didn't blink. Imani said, this room is about a child, and the air picked a side. Malik stood between past and presents, finally choosing the present out loud. The corridor emptied, leaving echoes that told the truth. Malik said, I won't let anyone make you small. Imani said, I am already whole, and the words steadied the floor. He smiled like a man remembering softness. Imani said, do not smile me into forgiveness. Malik said, I'll earn it or lose it clean. Noah called for water, and gravity reset. Imani lifted the cup and found mercy in motion. Malik held the straw and found purpose in patience. Zuri watched and nodded once. The moment warmed without permission. Hope exhaled, careful but present. The storm outside had faded, but inside the tension sharpened. Malik said, his labs showed genetic markers I recognize, and his gaze cut through silence. Imani's breath faltered, memory clawing up from buried places. She said, do not start this now, but her voice trembled. Malik leaned closer, softer this time. He said, I see myself in him. Noah shifted, his small frame echoing lineage neither could deny. Zuri's eyes widened, reading truths on faces that refused to speak them. Imani said, he is mine to protect, but her hand betrayed her, clinging to the blanket. Ha! Malik whispered, he is ours, and the word ours thundered louder than any storm. The monitor hummed steady, while Malik traced the chart with trembling fingers. Malik said, his blood type matches mine exactly. Imani's heart thudded, echoing against the sterile walls. She said, coincidence doesn't make you a father, but conviction cracked. Zuri shifted, whispering, some truths don't need papers. Malik looked at Noah's curls, remembering echoes of his own childhood. He said, every sign points back to me. Imani said, signs aren't enough, though her eyes betrayed storms. Malik's hands stilled, the pen dropping like a gavel. The air pressed heavy, filled with truths waiting to be claimed. Truth burst raw when Malik said, DNA will confirm it, but I already know. Imani shook her head, words scattering like broken glass. She said, you don't get to claim what you abandoned. Malik's eyes burned with regret and hunger for redemption. He said, I never knew he was mine. The sentence ripped open years of silence. Zuri said, Imani, he deserves the truth too. Noah stirred, small eyes blinking into a storm not his own. Imani cradled his head, whispering, you are safe. Malik's voice cracked, he is my son, and the air broke in half. The air shattered with voices colliding. Imani said, you left me with silence and scars. Malik said, I left chasing stability, not abandoning you. Zuri lifted her hands like a referee, but words raged louder. Imani's tears blurred Noah's face, but her grip never wavered. Malik's voice broke, I would have fought for both of you if I had known. Imani said, your fight came too late. The clock ticked in cruel rhythm, every second a blade. Noah whimpered, whispering, Mama. And silence returned, heavier than before. The door slammed open with authority, and Anika entered draped in judgment. Anika said, "This spectacle dishonors us," her voice sharp as glass. Imani rose, shielding Noah with her body. She said, "Your honor doesn't heal him." Malik said, "Mom, stop," but authority cracked. Anika's gaze lingered on Noah, calculation sharp in her eyes. She said, "This child will bring ruin if you're not careful." Zuri stepped forward, voice like thunder. "This child brings life, not shame." The room held its breath. Malik said, "He is my son," and finally chose. Anika's silence cut colder than her words. The storm outside had ended, but the storm within erupted. Imani said, "You can't erase years of absence with one claim." Malik's jaw clenched, fists tight at his sides. He said, "I would have been here if you told me." Zuri whispered, "Not the place, but the air was fire." Noah stirred, small eyes blinking through confusion. Imani crouched close, her hand steadying his breath. She said, "You don't get to rewrite what you missed." Malik's voice cracked. "I lost my chance because of pride, not because of love." The silence after was sharper than glass, cutting them both open. Malik's voice roared into the silence, "I never stopped loving you." Imani's heart jolted, but her face stayed steel. She said, "Love without presence is abandonment." Zuri pressed her lips tight, watching truth bruise the air. Malik stepped forward, his shadow crossing hers. He said, "Give me the chance to make it right." Imani lifted her chin, tears gleaming like armor. She said, "Second chances don't come without scars." The IV pump clicked, a cruel metronome. Malik whispered, "Let my scars meet yours." Imani's silence answered louder than words. The dam broke when Malik said, "He is my son, and you are my heart." Imani flinched, the words a blade and a balm. She said, "You gave me silence when I needed strength." Malik's eyes burned, his voice raw. He said, "I was a coward." Noah's cough cut through the heat, dragging them back to urgency. Imani pressed her hand against his back, steady as stone. Malik's hands hovered, desperate to help. Imani said, "Touch him then, not me," and guided his hand. For the first time, Malik touched his son, and silence carried them. Noah leaned into Malik's hand, small trust breaking open walls. Malik whispered, "Hey, little man," voice trembling like a prayer. Imani's throat locked, tears racing past pride. Zuri stepped back, giving space to the fragile beginning. Malik said, "You're stronger than me already." Noah blinked, soft smile forming despite weakness. Imani said, "He's all I had," her voice cracking with weight. Malik said, "He's all we have," and the word we stretched across years of silence. The monitor beeped steady, echoing new rhythm. Zuri whispered, "The truth is alive now." The climax struck with words too sharp for silence. Anika stormed back in, saying, "This child threatens everything." Imani rose, fire in her eyes. She said, "This child is everything." Malik stepped forward, voice breaking the past. He said, "I claim him, I claim her, I claim us." Anika's pearls trembled as her hands fisted. Zuri said, "Truth doesn't need permission," her voice like thunder. Imani grabbed Malik's gaze, torn between fury and forgiveness. She said, "If you mean it, prove it every day." The room shook with the weight of vows unspoken, but born at last. Dawn rinsed the city clean while the ER settled into softer breaths and slower footsteps. Imani said, "He's sleeping easy," and pressed gratitude against the rim of her fear. Malik said, "We can discharge after one more check," and steadied the room. Zuri rubbed her temples and said, "Peace feels suspicious, but I'll take it." Imani traced Noah's palm and said, "We need a plan that doesn't break us." Malik said, "I'll show up daily, and not just in this white coat." Anika hovered in memory like a cold draft under a door. Imani said, "Your mother cannot decide our home." Malik said, "She won't," and his voice carried spine. Zuri said, "Put it in writing, both of you, and slid her phone open. Imani said terms first, forgiveness later, and felt the anchor set. Malik nodded and said, I will earn each small yes until the big one arrives. They moved to a quiet consult room where the clock ticked like an honest witness. Imani said schedules, money, and boundaries, and wrote 3 columns on a pad. Malik said Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, I'm there after clinic. Zuri said emergency protocol and backups, tapping the table for emphasis. Imani said medical decisions require transparency, not surprises. Malik said, you get full access to my calendar and my silence when you say stop. The pen traveled like a bridge between separate shores. Imani said child, support in writing, automatic, non-negotiable. Malik said done, and exhaled like a man uncuffed. Zuri said, co-parenting app for receipts and messages. Imani said, we choose peace even when pride screams, and signed first. Malik signed next, the paper warming under his hand. Anika arrived with controlled calm that still cut like winter. Anika said, I came to apologize for my tone, not my standards. Imani said, Noah's health is the only standard here. Malik said, my family expands today, not negotiates its worth. Anika's eyes softened then steeled, a tide refusing full surrender. She said, if he is your son, he will not lack. Zuri said, he already does not lack, because he has us. Imani said, respect our rules and you are welcome. Anika said, I will try, and it sounded like a new language. Malik said, trying begins with listening. The hallway hushed as if the hospital leaned in. Anika nodded once, a small bow to the truth that finally spoke. Discharge papers rustled like wings preparing for flight. Imani said, we'll pick up the inhaler and spacer on the way home. Malik said, I'll deliver a written care plan and show Noah how to use it. Zuri said, video the demo so no one forgets. Imani lifted Noah's backpack and felt the weight of new beginnings. Malik crouched to Noah's level and said, I'll see you after school tomorrow. Noah nodded, trusting as sunrise. Anika watched from the doorway, choosing quiet over control. Imani said, we keep doctor and dad separate when needed. Malik said yes, and tucked his ego away. Zuri said, boundaries are love with fences, and smiled crooked. The elevator chimed like a promise, about to open. Outside, the rain had rinsed the streets into mirror and mercy. Imani said, home first, then sleep, then the rest, and breathed new air. Malik said, I'll bring groceries in humility, half smiling at the truth. Zuri said, text when you're settled, I'll drop soup and boundaries. Noah squeezed Imani's fingers and said, can he come read tonight? Imani's heart twisted, and then aligned. She said, tomorrow baby, we start slow. Malik swallowed hope like medicine and said, tomorrow I'll be on time. Anika stood beside him, quieter than pearls, and said, I will learn. Imani nodded, choosing dignity with room for grace. The city brightened one shade, and the day felt irritable. Silence followed them home, deeper than the hospital hum. Imani set Noah's shoes by the door and whispered, rest now, baby. The apartment smelled of lavender and tired survival. Malik lingered near the threshold, unsure if his presence was welcome. Imani said, this is his sanctuary, her tone layered with warning and grace. Malik nodded and said, then I'll treat it holy. Noah crawled onto the couch, hugging his blanket like a shield. Zuri dropped a grocery bag and said, food, love, and peace, 3 basics. The stillness carried a fragile hope, wrapped in exhaustion. Imani said, storms leave debris, and Malik answered, but they also leave water. The words hovered like fragile truce in the small space. The afternoon stretched quiet, broken only by Noah's breathing. Malik said, I'll return tonight if you allow, voice tentative. Imani said, boundaries first, then presence, keeping her words sharp. Zuri brewed tea and said, boundaries are lifelines, not chains. Malik lowered his eyes, shame folded into humility. He said, I will honor them. Imani stroked Noah's curls and whispered, I've never had help without cost. Malik said, then let me pay the cost with action, not excuses. The tea kettle hissed like punctuation, sealing the moment. The walls felt less hostile, though scars still hummed beneath paint. Noah woke with the innocence only children wield. He said, Mama, can Daddy stay? And the word Daddy pierced and mended in the same breath. Imani froze, eyes filling with both ache and awe. Malik's breath caught, shoulders sinking into humility. He said, only if Mama says yes. Noah smiled, unaware of the history thick in the air. Zuri bit her lip, eyes flicking to Imani for answer. Imani's chest ached as she whispered, tonight, he can read you a story. Malik's hands trembled, not from medicine but from mercy. The room exhaled in unison, fragile but real. Evening fell gentle, carrying the hush of forgiveness in draft form. Malik sat with Noah, reading a story about heroes and second chances. Imani watched from the doorway, arms crossed but heart open. Zuri whispered, sometimes healing sounds like bedtime stories. Malik's voice carried warmth, his eyes soft as Noah drifted towards sleep. Imani stepped closer, caught in the glow of father and son. Malik said, sleep, little man, tomorrow is brighter, his tone trembling. Imani blinked back tears, whispering, brighter if it's kept. Zuri exhaled, the air charged with fragile trust. The storm had not vanished, but the rain had slowed to mercy. The final silence was heavier than thunder and softer than prayer. Malik rose, placing the book on Noah's nightstand. He said, I'll be back tomorrow, I promise. Imani met his gaze, scars and love colliding in her eyes. She said, promises are fragile, keep them daily. Malik nodded, no defense left, only resolve. Zuri touched Imani's shoulder and said, some storms end with rainbows, some with scars. Imani whispered, both can be beautiful. Malik lingered at the door, whispering, thank you for letting me try. The clock ticked, the child dreamed, and the truth of family rewrote itself. The last breath of the night carried one line Imani thought, but didn't say, we may yet heal.